The Altian Republic is on the verge of collapse. Economic instability has fractured the nation. Unemployment and homelessness have infested the island. The politicians in Kavala, meanwhile, are far too polarized, unable or unwilling to work together and help the people. In the town of Ethera, a high-ranking AAF officer, Colonel Akhanteros, has decided to take advantage of the chaos and has put a coup d'etat in motion. Though he only directly controls a third of the Altian military, he has more than enough to quickly seize power. Units under his command have spread out all across the island and are on standby at key sites. The most important site to seize is of course the capital of Kavala, home to the civilian government. For a successful coup, Akhanteros' men will need to seize Radio Altis, which is the national radio station, as well as the Altian Congress, the President's office, and the Kavalan police station. To accomplish this goal, Akhanteros is sending 3 platoons to secure the city. In the north, the 2nd Rifles will be tasked with seizing Radio Altis and the north of Kavala, while the 1st Mechanized holds the main road in and out of the capital, stopping any government loyalists from reaching the city. Meanwhile, in the south, the 3rd Rifles will advance on Kavala through Panochori and capture the police station, as well as the President's compound. Unfortunately for our plotters, the civilian government in Kavala is partially aware of the coup, as one of Akhanteros' junior officers warned them. They've declared a state of emergency and locked down the routes in and out of the city, deploying hundreds of police officers to try and stop the army. They've so far refrained from asking for help from the AAF though, as they have no idea which units are involved in the plot and which aren't. For Akhanteros, it's too late to stop. If the coup fails, then he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. He warns his units to not let anything get in their way and authorizes lethal force. The 3rd Rifles had surrounded Panochori and were in a standoff with the police there when they received the colonel's orders. With their leader's blessing, they opened fire.
Okay, well, the army shot the first shots.
With violence breaking out, the 3rd Rifles began their movement, their units intent on seizing Panochori as quickly as possible. Phalanx, an infantry squad, moved in from the south, killing any police officers that got in their way.
No, I don't have any bullets left in the window!
They gunned down poorly defended police officers, who only had pistols to defend themselves. Another squad, Legion, meanwhile moved on the Panochori police station. Some officers try and fight back.
Freeze!
But their pistols and shotguns are no match for rifles and body armor. The shots in Panochori could be heard from Kavala itself. The police dispatched a helicopter to try find out what was going on, but it was quickly chased away by an AAF air asset that followed it all the way back to Kavala. The squads in Panochori meanwhile kept advancing, slicing through the town like a knife. Police officers tried to stop them, they were dropping like flies. However, the police weren't the only ones resisting. The town's citizens watched on as the soldiers gunned down their neighbors, their brothers. They watched as the AAF stormed into their homes, and some decided enough was enough.
Target stopped. Ow.
Okay, there are armed civilians in some of these houses, by the way. I walked into someone's house and he shot me in the back. I didn't exactly clear my corners, and yeah, so I think I deserve that one.
The problem with killing civilians is that it just incites more violence. Even more civilian gun owners decided to join in on the fighting, doing their best to slow down the AAF.
Die, traitors! This is for my brother!
Heads up, we have further police contact to our north and west.
Shot him in the head.
Appreciate help with it.
You're not welcome in Neri, green boys! Oh my god, I shot him in the ass! You're no match for a real patriot!
Despite the police and civilians' efforts, though, Panochori did fall with minimal casualties. Up north, meanwhile, the 2nd Rifles had taken Radio Altis. However, things hadn't exactly gone to plan. Akhanteros wanted the radio station intact, so he could broadcast his control of the capital to the entire island. However, the police officers defending the site had sabotaged it in a last act of defiance. Worse yet, the Minister of Defense had broadcasted a message to the entire nation before the radio went dark, warning Altians of the ongoing coup and beseeching them to rise up and defend the Republic. In Kavala, the police began handing out hundreds of confiscated rifles. AAF veterans began organizing volunteers into militia militias. Politicians made bipartisan speeches for the first time in years, telling their supporters to defend the city and stop the coup. Taking the capital wouldn't be as easy as originally presumed. Back towards Panochori, units from the 3rd Rifles had begun moving on Neri, however they soon found themselves under attack. Dozens of police officers sent from Kavala stormed up the hill towards them, armed with SMGs and rifles. This time it was the AAF who was on the defensive.
Die! You're never reaching the capital, you traitors!
Grown-ups, this is my members residing inside of it.
For the Republic! For Altis! You stand so fat.
We have reached your position.
Oh, I can see you. What is he doing? He's reloading, okay. What are you doing, man? I'm out of ammo, I gotta switch to my pistol. Crawl! Crawl faster, goddammit! Uh-oh.
A SWAT team even tried to retake Panochori by following the main road. However, they were quickly forced back by the platoon's weasel.
Oh, that's not good. That's even really bad. They can easily kill us. Fall back, boys. We're falling back. Oh god, they've broken the hull.
Once they'd repulsed the attack, night went down into the town itself. Most of the police were dead, but the civilians there had taken the Radio Altis speech to heart and began attacking soldiers.
Get the hell out of my town, you traitors!
Kill them.
Hey, you came to the wrong neighborhood, green boys!
Foxtrot, this is tonight. Currently we're just gonna be some fortified unless you'd rather us clear everything.
They even had to clear some of the houses, as the civilians inside were taking pot shots at them.
He's now.
Worse still, the police had handed out backpacks full of grenades to anyone who would volunteer. Knight would let these civilians pass as they assumed they were just trying to escape, until suddenly they started throwing grenades at them. Despite all these setbacks though, Neri fell to the AAF's advance, and 3rd Platoon was now at the gates of the capital itself. Together with 2nd Platoon, they steeled their resolve and pushed into the city. 2nd Platoon would be rushing to the Altian Congress, where they'd be arresting the Republic's politicians. 3rd Platoon, meanwhile, would start off by assaulting the Kavalan police station. Most of the unit would move to the top of this hill and provide covering fire, while Knight flanked from their south with the vehicles. The platoon was not ready for what was waiting for them, though. All along the route, Knight was being engaged by Kavalan militia. Citizens used whatever weapons they could to slow down the AAF. Some militiamen managed to flank them too thanks to the forests and opened up into their rear.
God damn it! Whew, that took them a while to see.
When one man went down, another was always ready to take his place. It was becoming clearer by the second that Kavala would not be easy to take. The teams began getting engaged from the town itself. Mortars landed around them. Hostile technicals began storming their positions. The people of Altis had heeded the government's call and were fighting back with everything they had. Phalanx had to move into the town itself to protect the unit's flank. They took over the southeastern edge of Kavala and engaged in CQC with the militias. Knight, meanwhile, kept pushing on the police station from the road. Eventually, they made it and began clearing it out. They gunned down the Kavalan police chief, who died with a pistol in hand. Up the hill from them, Legion was heavily wounded when a mortar landed right on their vehicle. Some AAF veterans had set up old mortars in Kavala's castle and were harassing both the 3rd and 2nd Rifles as best they could. The situation was rapidly getting out of hand. The 2nd Rifles were struggling to reach the Congress, bogged down instead in urban fighting. The 1st Mechanized, meanwhile, were equally busy, having to suppress militia reinforcements attempting to reach the capital. The situation was developing not necessarily to the Colonel's advantage. Originally, he'd wanted to capture the Altian president alive. However, with the increased resistance in Kavala, the risk of the president escaping was too great. Killing him might turn him into a martyr, but it was worth the risk. Akhanteros put out a kill order on the president, and Python, 3rd Platoon sniper element, tried to carry it out.
What in the goddamn? They killed Mike! Okay, seriously though, Mr. President, get down or you're gonna die.
Unfortunately, they missed and killed one of the president's bodyguards instead. Since the president was now hiding in his office, Python and Phalanx moved on the presidential palace. They fought their way inside, killing the president's guards. The president, meanwhile, began panicking.
I'm the president, and I demand you stand down! I'm the president, I demand you stand down! Executive privilege! Executive privilege! Stand down!
Black and ammo, gonna go RTB.
It's said that when loyalists recovered the body, they found over 100 bullets inside. The president clearly must have gone down fighting with the strength of a bull. Meanwhile, things hadn't gone exactly to plan for the 2nd Rifles. They'd managed to capture the Congress, but were getting resistance from the politicians inside, who refused to back down and surrender. The soldiers were on edge from all the fighting, and their officer wasn't there to keep them in check, as he'd been shot in the head by a civilian. One thing led to another, and killing the president was bad enough, but gunning down all the representatives in cold blood was even worse. Almost every man and woman in Kavala had picked up a gun at this point, intent on defending their freedoms at all cost. The AAF units in Kavala were no longer besieging the city, but were being besieged themselves. The first major casualty for the AAF was Paladin, the 3rd Rifles Weasel crew. It was caught in the open by militiamen, who blew it up with an anti-tank launcher. The 2nd Rifles began a fighting retreat back to Panochori, where they set up hasty defenses and fought for their lives. The 3rd Rifles, meanwhile, were split. Phalanx and Python were cut off from the rest of the platoon, and so moved to the castle. They cleared through it, eliminating any militia they came across, and eventually they set themselves up on the walls. They did their best to defend their position, facing overwhelming fire from the city.
Down, you get a cookie. Oh, we're hosed.
I think Tommy just got eviscerated.
Tommy, no!
The rest of the platoon, meanwhile, was holding around the police station. However, soon they found themselves being strafed by a biplane. Some civilian had mounted rocket pods and MGs on his personal plane and was using it to strafe their position.
We have to go. Yeah, we can't stay here. If we stay here, we're gonna die.
The militia was also assaulting their position from every direction. Civilians from surrounding towns and villages had formed militias and were assaulting the platoon from their rear. Spread out and taking casualties, the platoon lead gave the order to fall back to the top of the hill. The unit's helicopter, meanwhile, had to make an emergency landing at the castle, as it had been damaged by small arms fire. A mechanic from Phalanx was helping to repair it when they found themselves attacked from their rear. Some militiamen had commandeered fishing boats, and were using them to ferry soldiers behind the castle, flanking Phalanx and forcing them to fight for their lives. Things weren't looking much better at the commander level, as Akhanteros had just received some bad news. Major Anastas of the 4th Mechanized was on his way to the town with his men, except he wasn't on the colonel's side, and was instead coming to crush the coup and help the militia. Akhanteros could redeploy the 1st Mechanized to the south, so they could interdict the major, except then all the rebels trying to push in from the north would swarm the city and massacre the 2nd Rifles. But if he did nothing, the 4th Mechanized would assault the 3rd Rifles and wipe them out. Akhanteros considered his options and realized he had no other choice. He ordered his men to retreat out of Kavala and make their way to him. No matter what choice he made, Kavala was lost. Keeping his men alive and ready for the next battle was more important. The 2nd Rifles and 1st Mechanized began pulling out immediately upon receiving the colonel's orders. The 3rd Rifles, though, were in a much tougher spot. Surrounded and spread out over a kilometer, they would first need to regroup before they could head back to the colonel. The platoon leader made the call to pull back to Panochori, which was safer than their current position. Phalanx and Python were in the midst of fighting with militia over the castle.
Legion lead and transfer
Negative, you will not abandon
However, they followed their lead's orders and broke out. They unfortunately had to abandon the pilot's helicopter, as it'd be impossible to repair in time, so he joined with Python instead. Phalanx rushed past the defensive hill in their armored Fennecs, and instead headed straight to Panochori, doing their best to clear a route for the rest of the platoon. Python, meanwhile, tried to make their way to the rest of the platoon. However, they were chased out of town by a Helix Technical.
Where are we moving to, Foxtrot?
Weasel, that is a friendly, that is a friendly.
They neutralized it, but it managed to take out Python's lead. The rest of Python then mounted back up and tried to fall back to Panochori. However, they accidentally drove straight into a militia push. None of them survived. With the hill now being overrun, the rest of the platoon fell back. Legion and Foxtrot managed to mount up and fall back. However, Knight faced some trouble. Most of their team managed to mount up into vehicles. However, 2 of their soldiers were separated from the rest of their squad and were cut down by militiamen. Knight's remaining 6 soldiers mounted up into 2 Land Rovers and headed towards the fallback line. One of the vehicles managed to make it, but the other one was pretty heavily damaged, and a militiaman managed to disable it by shooting their engine. The 3 Knight members in the vehicle had to dismount and move on foot. They had almost a kilometer to cover, with enemies all along the way. They made a break for the buildings to their north while under fire. Soon, though, one of the soldiers caught a bullet and went down. 2 were left. The militia began advancing on their position with a technical. Another soldier was cut down like a dog. The final soldier managed to take out the technical, and the driver, but he was now alone. He had militia advancing on him, so he had to fight for his life.
Send.
I believe there were 2 survivors of this. Yes, that's fine. Could you please mark them up?
He had been shot multiple times. He started bandaging himself when a final militiaman pushed into his building. He perished as well. Of the 8 soldiers from Knight who'd held the hill, only 3 made it back to Panochori. The rest of the teams were also banged up, each having suffered casualties over the course of the battle. But they didn't have time to mourn. They had to move. The unit began shifting north towards the colonel. The Altian Civil War had just begun. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. A special thank you to my channel members, Midix Lion, Elzak Beg, Scout Trooper, Ness, Belmon, Flanella, Cretus, Fornicator, Colonel Oddball 27, Dransky Firefly, and Corey Dawson. You all helped make this possible, and it's awesome to see this list grow, so thank you so much for the support. My next video will probably be a sequel to my Annie-Stasi one, but if you like what you saw here, don't hesitate to ask for more in the comments. Alright, see ya!